the basic construct of mind, which is really nothing more than a succession of thoughts, is the nature of mind. It's the nature of mind to think. It's the nature of mind to sometimes to lose perspective. And in a world that's dominated by media, devices, content, we call it the always on phenomenon, we're always on. It's just important, I think, to have the opportunity to track back from that and have a little bit of switching off time. So today's session, I gave it the theme, making space. And the idea is, what can we do to give ourselves a little bit of a break from the constant activity of the mind? And what can we do to embrace a sense of stillness, a sense of calm, even during activity, even while we're involved in activity? Is it possible that we can at least temper the stressful, busy minds that we carry sometimes during the day with an immersion into a clearer, emptier state where we can recharge and we can start to, I guess, reconnect with a part of us that's a little more immune from the highs and lows. So the idea of making space is we're really exploring this concept of inner spaciousness. And of course, the ancient teachers of meditation were all too familiar with this opportunity. And through the various teachings and the techniques that we use and we share, that we can apply these ancient techniques into the modern day environment and still have a great deal of success. And the neuroscience is showing now quite consistently that even 8 weeks of daily practice is enough to start changing the neurology, start changing the way the brain responds to stressful situations. I mean, anxiety is all too common, the default state in many people. And what we're trying to do is wind that back so that the calmness becomes the default state. And then we can approach life with just this new enlivened sense of clarity, and where we can recharge and we can reconnect with a part of us that's a little more immune from the highs and lows, removed from the drama of the situation. But somehow, by building a sense of calm and stillness within ourselves, we actually have the capacity to be, I think, more present with what's going on and not captive to the thoughts of the past or the future, fears and anxieties and the things that are really, I think, limiting us. The neuroscience is very much aligning with the subjective states that we experience, and as meditators actually have a neurological basis. And the beauty of that is that it can be cultivated, it can be improved, it can be strengthened by the daily practice of sitting with stillness. So now the subtitle of the session today is The Secrets of a Calmer, Clearer and Happier Mind. So I suppose it's incumbent on me to reveal a few secrets today. And of course, to some of you, these are not secrets at all, but let's recap on what it is that we know about the mind. And then we'll do a quick exercise just to see how quickly you can tune in to the state that we're referring to. So I said that the mind, the nature of mind is to think, that the mind is actually defined by the ancient yogis, the yoga teachers, as the mind is nothing more than the constant stream of thoughts. And so their view of the mind is that when there are no thoughts, there is no mind. when the thoughts become still, then the mind, for all intents and purposes, it disappears. And the question then is, well, what remains? What remains when the thoughts start to calm down? And to answer the question, I'm reminded of a very famous quote from one of the founders of the modern theory. Well, when I say modern, I think he went back about 150 BC or thereabouts. His name was Patanjali, considered to be one of the fathers of yoga. And he wrote a series of sutras or aphorisms or sayings, I suppose, that encapsulate a great deal of the wisdom and that are derived through observation. And his first sutra, the first substantive sutra in the text of the Patanjali Yoga Sutras, is Yogas Chitta Vritti Nirodha, which is Sanskrit, and it means yoga, or the state of union, or you could say connection with our most inner state, is the cessation of the waves, the vrittis, the waves or the modifications of the mind. So in other words, he's saying that the cessation of the waves, of the calming of the waves, you can imagine an analogy with when the wind is blowing across the lake, then ripples form and wavelets, and it's impossible to see into the lake because of the turbulence on the surface. So I think this is a really powerful analogy. So when we're talking about the cessation of the waves, the modifications, the waves, the vrittis, we're talking about bringing the mind to a lower level of activity where the waves eventually cease. And so the mind in that case would stop. We say the mind stops. Now, it may not be possible or easy for us to get to that state straight away, but you'll get a taste of it. And even today, when we do some of the practices, you'll know when you're feeling that. Then he goes on to the second sutra, which is that then once the waves of the modifications or the waves of the mind stop, he says, and then the seer or the experiencer abides in his own true nature. So when the waves, the modifications, the thoughts cease or they die down, then the experiencer abides in, rests in, they take refuge in their true state. So what he's saying is a very, very powerful and commonly repeated principle in yoga, and that is that our true state is one of stillness. Our true essence is one of just the state of pure awareness. And so those two sutras, when you take them together, they encapsulate what the aim is. Yoga is the stilling of the disturbances of the mind. And then the second sutra gives us the result, the aim and the result. So the aim is that we do this, and the result is this, and then you will experience your own true nature as stillness or as pure awareness. So that's the theory. Now let's give it a try. So what I would invite you to do is to close your eyes, and we're going to bring our awareness to the breath as it flows in and out very easily. And let's just begin by observing the contents of the mind. And you'll notice straight away that there may be some thoughts. Maybe there are not so many today. But just watch as a thought arises. Where does the thought come from? Where does it dissolve into? And so we redirect the awareness now to the space between the thoughts. What happens when there isn't a thought for a moment? What is there instead? And you might sense that in that state in between the thoughts, that there is a certain sense of feeling of stillness, of calm, peace. And so the next step is to remove the awareness from the thoughts altogether and just rest within that state of calm. And so and the key here is to allow the thoughts to continue if they wish to operate in the background. That's fine. We're not attempting to engage with the thoughts. We're just choosing instead to redirect the awareness back into the space or the stillness that sits between, or you could say the space behind the thoughts. So we allow the awareness effectively to become aware of itself. So you notice how that feels, and just allow yourself a minute to surrender into this state of the space between or behind the thoughts. Okay, and now bring the awareness back to the breath, which is where we started. And just notice how the mind feels now. If you want, you can open the eyes now very gradually, but when you do, I want you to just get a sense of whether you notice anything different. Whether you feel a little bit different. And then, as my teacher always used to say, don't take what I say for granted, test it against your own experience. See that it's true for yourself. So the question is, I've told you that Patanjali says that the yoga or the state of connection with self arises when the waves or the turbulence or the thoughts within the mind start to cease, to settle. And then you become aware of your true nature. Now, the question is, were you able, firstly, to observe the thoughts beginning to settle just by becoming aware of them and then by becoming aware of the space between them? So that's the first question. Did you notice a cessation of the vrittis, the waves? If you did, then the second question is, what was that experience that remained? Does that feel familiar to you? Does it feel a natural state? Does it feel, in some ways, is it a more authentic state of you? This state of the empty sense of just pure presence in the moment? Does that feel that that's a part of you as well? And then the really good question is, if the answer to that is yes, does it in fact feel almost, you could say, more authentic, the more real part of you than the thoughts or any perception of the body or the external sensations of the world? Is that inner state of stillness? Do you agree with Patanjali then when the vrittis, the turbulence within the mind begins to calm down? Do you get this idea of abiding within your own state? That's the key. And I mean, if your answer to that is yes, then you've already validated one of the core principal teachings of yoga, which is just evident within 2 sutras, 2 short statements. So that's an example. That's a secret, I suppose you could say. So how do we apply this secret in real life? Well, the key is, and this is quite a skill in itself, is how do you disengage from the drama for long enough to remember to do the practice? Because you know what it's like when things arise and things have to be dealt with. It's very easy to be drawn into the situation, and you forget momentarily about this opportunity to pull back and to take a breath. And before you know it, you're embroiled in the drama, and the emotions start to rise and you feel anxious. Or maybe it's the narrative, it's the thoughts themselves, which is really the cause of anxiety for people. You start to worry about being worried. You start to be anxious about being anxious. The thoughts start to feed on themselves and you get into an escalation, which then has a color to it. They talk about this in yoga, that the thoughts take on a color. Well, it's an emotional energy, actually. So it might be the color of fear. It might be the energy of fear. Or maybe, let's say you're in a situation where there is a demand on you. You have to perform at a peak level. And suddenly the thought comes in of doubt. What if I can't do this? And so when we meditate, what we're doing is we're trying to go beyond the power of those limiting thoughts to stand between us and the experience of who we actually are. So let's try that as an experiment. Now we'll close our eyes again, and this time we're going to just again tune into the pure awareness. So if you can, just to lock into the underlying sense of self, or you could just say your feeling of presence, pure present awareness. And you just allow everything to settle down a bit. And you examine the state of your own essential nature, we would say, which is, that doesn't really rely on any belief system. It's independent. It's self-supporting. In other words, it doesn't require any precondition to exist. This state of pure awareness is there anyway. Irrespective of what we believe, what we think, this state, when we close our eyes and we go within, the state's always the same. It may be harder for us to reach sometimes because of our emotional state, but the state itself, the substrate, the ground state, or the background field of consciousness, it's there anyway. This is another sort of fundamental premise in yoga, is that which we seek, we already have. Well, let's talk about this idea of happiness, which is another dimension to today's session. We talk about having a calmer, clearer, happier mind. The state of happiness that the yogis talk about is not a state that is conditional on any external thing being present. So you could say that there's sort of different forms of happiness. You could say there's a form of happiness that is contingent or depends on something. So for instance, say it's a hot summer's day and you see someone walk past with an ice cream, and in that moment the desire arises, I wish I could have an ice cream. And the more that you reflect on that, the more the desire grows, and you start to feel like a craving for this thing that you want to have. And then eventually maybe you'll get the ice cream, and you'll, in that moment where you finally grab it and you lick it and the desire is fulfilled, there is a feeling of relief, of just release, that the thing that was holding you away from that feeling of satisfaction is gone, and now you have the thing that you were craving. And that is definitely a form of happiness, and I wouldn't deny that external things can give rise to happiness. I think it would be wrong to otherwise. I mean, why do people do what they do? Everyone's chasing down happiness and they're trying to avoid pain. Those are the two main dynamics in our life. So if it's true that those things can give us happiness, where's the problem? Happiness that's depending on, if we're pinning our happiness on the existence of things that we can't control, we're already setting ourselves up to fail, because it'll be fine when those things are present, but what about when they're not? So what the yogis say is, look, there's nothing wrong with pursuing happiness in external things, as long as you realize that the happiness that we're encountering is experienced. Is it anywhere other than in ourselves? If we could just go straight to the feeling of happiness directly, without needing the ice cream or the bottle of beer or the praise of another person or the achievement of an award or a job promotion, pay rise, a holiday, a new relationship, you can fill in the blank there. But how cool, and none of those things are wrong, but what they're saying is, wouldn't it be a more reliable pathway to happiness if we could just find out where the happiness is in us and just go straight there? Wouldn't that be a pretty powerful thing for us to do for ourselves? And so what I'm going to do now, we'll do another little exercise, another little practice. And we don't have any external objects today, although at the meditation center here, sometimes we do the chocolate meditation. And so we will actually, it's called a dharana, or a centering technique, where you use a stimulus to trigger a feeling of happiness, and then we go into the happiness itself and we allow the stimulus to just fall away. But this time there's another way you can do that practice, and that is with the mere recollection, with the memory of something that made you happy. All right, so if you close your eyes, easier to close your eyes and I'll talk you through this. So you're closing your eyes, and I want you to bring into your mind the remembrance of a very happy event or a experience that made you really happy. And it could be something recent or it could be something from before. So see if you can locate the memory. Maybe it was meeting somebody or eating something you really love, or you decide. Okay, so have you caught hold of the experience? And then I want you to just relive it in your mind as if it was happening right now. And you feel the happiness arise, the feeling of happiness rises up in you. It wells up in you. Maybe you're feeling it in the heart region or somewhere there. Go into the experience of the happiness now. Just feel like the happiness is spreading right throughout your whole body. You might even allow yourself to smile, or feel that you're smiling inside, however you want to do that. And you feel that happiness really accentuate that feeling. Okay, now what I want you to do is go into the heart of the happiness, go into the center, into the most concentrated place where that happiness is. It's like exhilarating. The closer you get to the core of it, the stronger it gets. And then I ask you can just release the stimulus, if it hasn't already fallen away by now. You forget about the thing, the event, and just feel the happiness itself. Okay, have you got that? I want you to really absorb this experience. Imprint it. Not the stimulus, not the event, the thing, but the feeling of the happiness itself. I want you to really own that. Make it your own. After all, whose else could it be, right? Okay, now come out of the state. So that's sort of a tracking back exercise where we're going to the initial cause. Or, you could even call it the apparent cause, and I'll say why that is in a minute, because the yogis would probably argue that it wasn't even the cause to begin with, but let's just park that idea. Now that you've come out of the state, let's go back in again. So close your eyes, and this time I want you to forget about the experience that caused it and just go straight into the happiness. See if you can just relocate that, go into the core of the happiness. And I want you to amplify that. Once you've found it, I want you to really dive in deep. Just feel it overwhelm you. That you are, in fact, you become the happiness in this moment. All right, now we did that without reference to the original stimulus. So doesn't that show that it's possible to feel happiness independent of anything? If the potential for happiness was already in us, the thing that was the trigger was the thing that we told ourselves we needed to have before we could have that experience. So it was what we call precondition. But what if we just took out the precondition and just said, you know what? How about I'm going to have a new belief now that says that I know that I can be happy and feel this sense anytime I choose to, just by closing my eyes and going within, or by just recollecting, remembering something that made me happy, but I don't actually need the thing anymore. And the memory itself is hardly doing any work at all now that I know that the feeling is in me. Maybe I don't even need the memory. But this is a really empowering technique, because what it shows us is that we can be happy independent of anything. And if you can embrace that idea and apply it, you'll find that you'll become a lot more contented as a person, because contentment, after all, is the feeling that you have everything that you need right now, that nothing else could be added to you that could make you feel any happier, any more at peace than you are right now. That's contentment. And the Buddha said that, someone said, what is true wealth? And he said, true wealth is contentment. Because he said that someone that's discontented, that feels lack, that feels dissatisfied, it doesn't matter how much they own, how much possessions, how many possessions they have, how much money they have. If they still feel like they haven't got enough, then they're not going to be at peace. There's no peace there because the craving for more is still present. Whereas he said, to the man who is contented, or the woman that feels that she already has everything within herself, what need is there for to go chasing after the things in the world that we can't rely on for our happiness? But again, I say, we're not saying that doesn't mean don't have a career, don't pursue your goals, don't do all those things that give you satisfaction. Maybe that you get happiness from helping other people. That's legitimate. But remember, even in that situation, the sense of contentment or satisfaction is still one that you feel inside of yourself. But I think for the time being, if you want to substitute chasing, ice creams and women and experiences and whatever it is that you want to chase, you just say to yourself, I'm going to make the rational decision from now on that, particularly with COVID, I can't go out and spend money anyway, right? Can't go to the nightclub, the disco. So I'm going to reinvest my efforts into cultivating my internal state and maybe helping other people as well. Then I think that's a pretty good place to begin. You don't have to go to the Mother Teresa state just yet. Today you can allow yourself a little bit of service, happiness, and I think that's legitimate. All right, now let's do another technique. Let's go for the secrets around developing some mental clarity. So close our eyes again. And this time we're going to go for a few minutes, okay? So this will be the final practice that we do today. And this will involve a visualization using the breath. And when we emerge from this state, you may initially feel still a little bit hazy because I'm going to take you into a sort of a deeper, more abstract meditative state. But what I want you to notice is in the hour following this technique, did you feel clearer? This is the key to it. It's not that you won't get it instantly, but you're going to get a longer term effect from this particular technique that might last for the rest of the day even, or even for a few hours. So we close our eyes and we're imagining ourselves sitting as a hollow vessel, so that the body is hollow inside, completely empty, all the way down to the fingers and toes. It's an empty void space. And the only thing that's keeping us separate from the outside world is a very, very thin, luminous skin that is glowing. It's made of a very fine, diaphanous, sheer, shimmering skin. So that's our outer boundary, our definition. And inside of that, there is this hollow space. And now as we breathe in, we imagine that the breath that's coming in is bringing in light. So you're breathing in light. And it's filling with each breath this hollow space. And with each breath, more and more of the space becomes filled with light. And you notice a tremendous sense of freedom, that you're dropping all concern and you're just embracing this sense of cleansing, purification. Now, the next step in the process is that we imagine that outside of ourselves that there is also light. And so we're breathing light into light. And when we breathe out, the light merges with the light. And now the next stage, once you've got that idea, is that with each breath you begin to experience the inner field of light beginning to expand. So like you're expanding as a balloon, being filled with air, but you're being filled with light and you're expanding, and the thin diaphanous, the sheer shimmering membrane of your skin begins to expand, but then it begins to dissolve as it expands. And the light field within begins to expand and merge completely with the field of light outside of yourself. And as you continue to breathe, you feel this sphere of light filling the room. As you continue to breathe, it's filling the entire building you're in. Or if you're outside, it's filling the entire space outside as it envelops the entire suburb and the region. The whole country, and eventually you're seeing the whole planet as you are expanding beyond this field of expanding light. It's just going further out in all directions until it envelops the solar system, the galaxy, and beyond, outwards until the entire infinite universe becomes part of this infinite field of luminous, shimmering beingness. So now this infinite field of expanded light, you sense that is you. It has no center and no boundary. And eventually you just dissolve into it as just this feeling of pure presence, pure awareness, resting in its own infinite nature. And we're just going to sit in this state for a minute, and I'll return in about a minute. And now bring your awareness back to the breath. I know a lot of times people say, I don't want to come out of this state. Why do we have to end now? But that's okay, because you can go and practice this in your own time when you've got no time limit. And you can go for 10, 15, 20 minutes just resting in this infinite state of stillness. But for now, it's time to return. So if you can come back into your physical body. And then as you open the eyes, just look around. Things may seem a little different. Next time we do this, maybe in another week or two, we're going to go into the practice of self-inquiry. But I'll give you a little clue. If I was to say to you now, who is it that sees? What is it that looks through my eyes? Now that you've had a nice taste of the infinite, what is it that looks through these eyes and perceives through these senses? Who is that? So that's a little teaser for the next session, where we're going into this sense of self-inquiry, which is a very, very powerful and very, very liberating practice. See, in the yoga, we talk about this idea of being happy for no good reason. The sense of happiness that you feel when we did that practice, it's already there, but we have to recondition, reprogram ourselves so that this state comes to the surface by itself. It will rise by itself. And so I think there's this power in the immersion of these practices that the sense of happiness over time will just begin to bubble up, just as a product, a byproduct, a result of the practices themselves. By doing this and spreading it, that we can maybe get more people to just experience a little bit more calm, a little bit more clarity, a little bit more happiness.